You guys know these two very well. They are trailblazers when it comes to women on Wall Street and just set a great example for all of us here. Sallie, to my left, is the new owner of 85 Broads. So congratulations, which was established back in '97, in case you don't know, and named for the address of Goldman Sachs' former headquarters. It's got 30,000 members in about 130 countries, and we're all eager to hear about her plans for 85 Broads. That'll be part of the questioning tonight. And Karen, of course, you know her as the author of the book, which you all received in the lobby tonight, Finerman's Rules, Secrets I'd Only Tell My Daughters About Business and Life. She, of course, is a contributor, regular contributor to the show that I host, Fast Money. She's also the president and the co-founder of Metropolitan Capital, which is a value-oriented hedge fund. So, away with the questions now. This is just a chat, girls.
Okay. Just us three little chickens here chatting.
Three chickies here, sitting up here talking about women on Wall Street. Karen and Sallie, first of all, obviously you've achieved so much in your careers, so I think a logical question would be, for Karen specifically, why do you feel the need to write such a book when women have come so far?
Well, I think as far as women have come, I see them as not having come far enough. And also, I think, you know, I had a eye-opening experience when I said to my older daughter, Lucy, who I think is here, you know you're going to be managing money, your own money, and taking care of your own money at some point. And she was surprised by that. And I thought I had sent that message so clearly.
Loud and clear.
And I'm sorry, Lucy, apparently I didn't send that message as clearly as I thought. And so I want my daughters to be empowered, my sons as well, but I do think it's a different message that daughters receive than sons. And I wanted them to know also that sometimes women get in their own way and maybe how to help them.
So I think one of the greatest messages that I've gotten from your book, Karen, that is, it's not just a man's world and it's the men keeping the women down, but sometimes it's women and the barriers they construct themselves that are preventing them from achieving success. So Sallie, I'm just curious, is that what you found also in your own career? Did you find that you were somewhat of your own obstacle, maybe your greatest enemy?
Well, you know, what I would actually take a little bit of a different make a little bit of a different statement than what you made when you introduced the question, which is when women have come so far. I'd actually say the advancement of women in business has stalled, and the advancement of women on Wall Street, if you look at the very senior levels, has actually gone backwards. And you know, as I like to say, because it's true, we went into the downturn with Wall Street being sort of a white male, middle-aged bet, and we came out whiter, maler, and middle-ageder. Right. So we've doubled down on the bet. Now, I also always make a point of saying I love white, middle-aged men. I've been married to a couple of them. I think they're not at the same time. I think they're terrific. But the reason I think it's important to talk about this is that my career started as a research analyst. I think of myself as a recovering research analyst. And the research shows that more diversity, not more women, but more diversity of thought and background at the top of these companies reduces risk. Higher returns, but reduces risk, reduces volatility. So I think it's an important conversation for us to be having to say, gee, is it important to us as a country, as a nation, for people who've got different backgrounds to get ahead?
So to extrapolate, would it be fair to say then, you started as a research analyst covering banks, that banks are more at risk now because we are more middle-agey and whiter male-y these days? Well,
and yet there's more capital on the other side.
That's
now, we
true.
can debate whether there's enough capital. I don't think we've really fully finished that discussion as a nation. So you've got some pluses and some minuses, but I think it's I think we're at such an interesting point in time. You know, folks like Karen speaking up, writing these books about women, getting ahead. Obviously, we all now know what lean in means. By the way, I've leaned, I fell. But you know, this national discussion we're having, Warren Buffett, women are a great investment. It's just a fascinating time and debate we're having.
Right. Would you agree that the progress of women on Wall Street has stalled?
I guess I wasn't in the top echelons of the corporate world like Sallie, And so I would see it a little more.
But even from the hedge fund perspective, you are at the forefront. Your firm is predominantly
Yes.
women, so you are out there
Right.
when it comes to representation of women amongst hedge funds.
I think it's moving a little bit. I can't understand why it hasn't moved a lot. Because when you look at, I saw Wharton, the MBA class this year, almost 45% women. Harvard MBA class, 41% women. And where do they go? I don't know what happens between where they graduate. I don't know, there's an abyss. I don't know what happens. Where do they go? I'm surprised they haven't come into the hedge fund business.
Do you think women feel more empowered these days to make a decision to not go into Wall Street and to do other things and maybe even be a full-time mom, and that's sort of what has come of the freedom that women now have?
Well, I think Wall Street is decidedly less glamorous post-2008,
Yes,
for sure.
good point.
No doubt about that. But I would say I would be surprised that a woman who would do what it takes to get into the Harvard MBA program that seems to me a little counterintuitive that same woman would want to then shortly after that be a stay-at-home mom.
Right.
I mean, it's her choice, obviously.
It's exhausting.
Which one? Working or being at home?
All of it. That's
the key, right?
It's that balancing act. It's exhausting. There's a picture of me that my daughter repeatedly points out to me online, and she pulls it up and she laughs because I am gaunt and exhausted and pale and gaunt and pale, and she says, "Look, Mom, it's your older sister, your ugly older sister."
And what were you doing at the time?
It's me in 1997. And I said, "You know why? Because you were one."
Yeah.
Right? And you look at this. I want to go into the internet and give that woman a huge hug and just say, "You're going to make it through. It's going to be okay." So, look, we can. I've got a great husband. I mean, the second husband is a great husband, and he and I split the work fairly equally. But there were certain things women can do, biological things that men cannot, and there's certain expectations upon us. I don't know if you've heard my hair and makeup spiel. Okay, so
yes,
you've heard
I know it.
Right?
I know it. I live it. Yes,
we
go.
do. And we all do. The hair and makeup spiel is that when my husband and I are, want to head out to breakfast together, which rarely happens, but let's pretend, right? In order to do that, I have to get up earlier than he does. And let's assume for the hair and makeup. And if we assume that I'm very low maintenance, which I'm not, but if we assume that it's only 15 minutes a day extra, 15 minutes a day is an hour and 15 minutes a week, is 5 hours a month, is 60 hours a year, equals 1 work week a year.
Wow.
And as I say, I haven't even shaved my legs yet. In fact, I remember going on Squawk in the morning and walking in, and there's, there to get on all the makeup, and there's Becky,
Yes.
and then 30 minutes later, in come the guys.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So it's the little, it's not just the big things, it's the little things too.
Yeah, it's an hour a day for me, an extra hour a day that I could be spending doing whatever else and not getting my hair blown out.
You look great, though.
Worth
You
every
do.
minute.
You look great.
Well, I always say Melissa was biologically engineered to be an anchor woman. You can pull on her hair, you could put anything in it, you can do whatever. She just sits there, reading, silent, very
There's
zen.
nothing you can do because it's just part of being a woman. It's part of the job. It's part of the job at this point. So, I mean, we have to address what Paul Tudor Jones said about being a woman and whether or not you think that exemplifies it. Because you mentioned the picture back in '97 when you were pale and gaunt and exhausted and pale and exhausted and gaunt. Is there some element of truth where when women experience the beautiful experience of motherhood that they are distracted?
I think I don't think your judgment goes out the window the moment that baby's lips touch your bosom, I think was a quote. I don't think your judgment goes out the window right then. I think for me, I couldn't wait to get back to work. Now, all my kids are here, so, not that I don't love you, I do, but I just knew for me that was what I wanted to do. That is fulfilling for me, and that statement I just found, I don't know, first of all, I couldn't believe he said it, but I don't agree with it at all. but I think there are some women who then it changes. Something changes for them and their priorities do change. But to me, the problem with that statement was that each woman wouldn't know herself whether those priorities had changed or not for her.
Let's talk about the facts. The facts are that the research shows that women investors outperform male investors. That's what the facts show. And the facts also show, if we're going to talk about where the problem is or the opportunity is, women raise much less money as hedge fund managers, as investment managers, and when women start businesses, they are successful more often than men's businesses are. Now, it's harder to think of the grand slam home run business that a woman started, but neither it's more singles and doubles, and yet the venture capital funding goes to women much less than it does to men. So as I look at the problem or the opportunity, it's not, geez, these folks just can't do the job. It's what is keeping the capital from finding its way to where those returns are? Are there opportunities there for you? And I've talked. We actually talked about this a couple of weekends ago when we were together. Which is it? Do women who receive coaching on how to ask for the order, right? Is it that the communication style, there's an opportunity there, or are there some inherent biases that both men and women have? And that's something I've been thinking a lot about on both sides, right? Is there a coaching opportunity, and is there a capital opportunity?
Well, from the coaching side, or from the woman's perspective, Karen, do you think that this is an example of women getting in their own way, that women don't know how to ask or to put themselves out there enough to ask, to say, I am the best, this is where you want to put your money?
I think that's part of it. I think also part of asking for that money is selling yourself. Okay, so what you've accomplished, what you've done, and I think that for most women, for me absolutely included, that doesn't come naturally. That doesn't feel quite right to toot your own horn. That really is an uncomfortable feeling, and in some ways it almost feels inappropriate, even though for a man to do it.
Why does it feel inappropriate?
It's sort of unbecoming, and I'm sort of trying to get used to that. There's something about being ambitious that isn't seen in a favorable light for women. And yet, for men, to be ambitious is not seen as a negative, it's an attribute.
But see, this is where she's hitting on an important point, which is that it is not right, it's not fair, it's upsetting, it's disturbing, but women are allowed a narrower emotional channel through which to communicate. And that for all the talk is, well, women are so emotional, I have found over the course of my career that men can be heard in this type of emotional channel, but that I was able to be heard here. And that, in fact, I remember, I will never forget, sitting at the management table at Citigroup. It was myself and one other woman, and it was Citigroup. People had tantrums all the time. And this woman had a tantrum one time, and even as she was having it, I was making little faces behind her back, right? Sort of like, ooh, look at that. And I thought, if this is me who's having a reaction to this, her stepping out of the emotional channel, and I'm very aware of this stuff, other people are. And so, I don't know if it's, we're hardwired for it, and it's upsetting, but they're really, so as hell, Mika wrote a whole best-selling book on how to ask for a raise.
It's true.
Right? And she talked about, she asked, she went in too much, and then she had to pull back, and, then the porridge was too hot, too cold, just right, she got the raise. The story arc is complete. But you don't see a lot of books for guys on asking for raises, do you?
They ask. They have no problem asking. So the channel is like this because up here is too emotional and down here is too cold. You're just a cold bitch down here.
Well,
sort of thing.
I think maybe, and then there's sort of too masculine, too feminine. You remind me of a guy. You remind me of my nagging whatever relationship that is that person nags me in. And that's men and women. So again, not fair, not right, but worth remembering.
You must walk the tightrope too.
Well,
or you have.
One time I cried, and I will never, ever, ever do that again. Yeah.
What
I
did you-
mean
what
at
did you
work.
cry- wait, what
I don't
did you
mean in
cry
my life.
about?
What?
What did you cry about, and why
All
do
right.
you regret it?
We weren't properly hedged. and and I couldn't believe it. I just and it was like it was someone.
Were you sad or were you angry?
I was sad to be losing that much money. That's sad. But I was angry. I was upset with myself. And you know, your immediate reactions are, who can I blame? No, nobody. Me. So that was quite distressing. And I literally cried over not being hedged. Okay, now it's funny, sure, but then wasn't as funny. So and then I felt like, you know what? When it was a difficult market period, and I felt like our team needs to see me not crying. That's a terrible message. I never cried again, with the exception of 9/11, which was a whole different kind of thing. But it's terrible. Maybe it works in other fields. Never
Isn't
again.
that the
no
equivalent,
matter what.
though, of a man throwing a telephone or a keyboard or something like that? I mean, what?
Maybe, but that breeds a little bit of, instills fear. Right. Crying, people don't know what to do with it. They don't know what to do with it, and I wish I hadn't done it, and you know, I will never do it again. I don't know if
Everybody knows about it.
Well, yeah.
Sallie, have you ever sort of crossed the line, gone out of the emotional channel and regretted
Absolutely.
it?
Absolutely. And I also recognized that if I was going to do that, I wanted to do it for the right reason. That because I was aware that people, just as I remembered my colleague stepping out of her emotional channel to this day, and it's 10 years later, that if I were to lose my temper, and particularly because at work, I'm not a big up and down person anyway. It'd be hard to have worked on Wall Street as long as I have, up and down, you know, if you were up and down emotionally. But I would recognize, if I'm going to lose my temper, I better not waste it, because people are going to be talking about it. And so it had to be for something very, very important.
Which was?
Oh, there were some instances back at Citi in which we had sold highly levered alternative investment products to clients, in which the view of the people who put them together was that they would not go down much in a bad market, and they went down all in a bad market. And in working to partially share the losses with our clients, those were times it was very much worth losing my temper, because the stakes for the business were so very, very high.
So you used it in a very sort of Machiavellian way.
No, you know, because I felt it. I mean, you know, the emotion was there, but rather than say, I feel emotional, keep it back, don't cry, don't have a fit, you know, this is one like, I feel this way, let her rip.
Right. And it's going to be worth it. I mean, there's
Absolutely.
going to be a payoff in
Absolutely.
the end. And I think, Karen, in your book, you address the fact that there are some advantages that women have that should be used in appropriate ways.
Inappropriate?
Space-appropriate ways.
I see. Okay. Yes, and one of the advantages I talk about is when I was just starting out in the hedge fund business, they kind of give you different industries that you're assigned to, and you were assigned to financials. And so I noticed, though, if you're assigned to the retail space and you cover retail companies like Macy's and Gap and stuff like that, that's actually the most women-populated space. But then if you go to look at industrial companies or energy companies, the ratio of women to men is 10 to 1 or fewer women even. And so if you're the only woman in the room, that's actually to your benefit, I think. And so, you know, there's not a guy who runs a Midwestern industrial company out there who doesn't want to have a young woman hanging on his every word. How often does that happen? Probably not so much at home, maybe. And so that's a little bit of an advantage, I think. And so we've got to use it.
What was the perception, though, of you as a female, as a young female, in a predominantly male space at that time, though?
Sort of a confusion. What do you do? Where are you coming from? What's, you know? But if you're genuinely interested and want to learn, I think that you have a good chance of having someone help you learn. So
Is that
was
how
important.
you ended up in financial services initially?
I don't remember. I think it was the job that was on offer. Oh, because I started in life insurance and no one else wanted the job. So as we were talking about backstage, I took a pay cut. I got my pay cut in half and took a demotion in order to take the job, and it worked out very well. But I would say on the thinking about being a woman, and we all spend so much time talking about how it hurt. You know, people love to write about how it hurts and sort of, as we say, admire the problem of women getting ahead. But, you know, I agree with Karen. I think there are points at which it may be helpful. And I think the opportunity for a woman's touch in management, you know, may be on the way. And what I mean by that, you know, females tend to be, males can be, but females also tend to be very good at communication, listening, collaboration, building consensus, you know, gathering that information, synthesizing it. And when I had responsibility for both Smith Barney and Merrill, it was very interesting because I'd seen some folks, in this case, I guess since I was the only woman who, ever ran those, men who had come in and said, financial advisors, we're taking the hill, right? We're running up the hill, we're charging, we're whatever war metaphors or sports metaphors they used. And the financial advisors actually did this, which is we're going to watch you run up that hill. When, you know, as I interacted with them, you know, it was much more about coming in and, okay, give us feedback. What do you got? You know, what's working, what's not working? Where are we investing that makes sense? Where are we investing that doesn't make sense? And what was so interesting is they were very happy to tell you where to invest, but they were very happy also to say, find the money over here and do it this way. And so what I did when I went in was I instructed the team, we're going to wallow for 3 months or so and find the information. Then we're all going to take the hill. But it's not necessarily going to be, I'm out here running ahead and you guys follow, okay, but let's then run up it together. And I think that type of management style, particularly with social media and the ability to engage with your customers in a way you just couldn't before, I think you're going to see more and more of leaders using that because I think their customers are demanding it.
Do you think that that's being valued these days on Wall Street, Karen? That sort of the gentler touch, the collection of information?
Well, I have a little different related to that maybe that I think women do well. Risk aversion, I think, is a big one. But also, in my business, some of the best trades you can make are cutting your losses, taking a small loss. And I feel like that's a quality that women are more comfortable with. It might be a little bit on the softer side, but it's a humility. It's not, you know what, I have to be right, I'm going to be right, I'm going to stick this out to the end. I think women can look at it a little and say, you know what, this isn't what I thought, I made a mistake, I'm out. And so to me it's a little bit of an ego thing that I think women have less of that I think is
so
helpful.
It cuts both ways. I mean, women have the ego and the humility, so they don't necessarily, they're not the ones to demand a raise or say, I deserve a raise. But at the same time, this enables a woman to cut their losses and to recognize that they're in a losing position and walk away.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an
It's just
important
recognizing
difference when you can use
when it's
that
good
same
and
quality.
when it's bad.
Right. Right.
In terms of 85 Broads,
Yes.
it's a women's networking organization. You recently became the owner of it. Does that mean that your outlook for the future for women on Wall Street is still pretty, I don't want to say dire, but
No.
but just sort of acknowledging that women need this help still and will need it in the future?
But I think about it differently than that. And first of all, it is, while its roots were a Goldman Sachs alumni network, it expanded to financial services and is now not only all industries, but it's around the world. And I actually think about it differently. I think, and I haven't completed my thinking on it. Somebody says, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm thinking.
So you're not charging up the hill
And
yet.
no, I'm not charging the hill. And actually, we're engaging with the network, very actively engaging with and hearing from the network about what they consider is they've joined 85 Broads, what is the social contract? What did they join for? What do they like? What didn't they like? And so it's a fascinating period of time. But I think the opportunity there is not women need help or it's a support group or any of that stuff. I mean, I think of support groups to get you through a rough patch, right? Being a woman is, if that's a rough patch, that's a long rough patch, right?
With no way out.
Right.
Yes.
Well,
Right.
it's a tough way out, however you get out. But instead, what I've been really thinking about, if you think about how corporations have been a way for people to come together to do stuff, what's so interesting today is that technology has enabled a different way for people to come together to do stuff. In this one, this is my job, I get paid, I go in. This one, I choose to be part of this. This is what I want to accomplish. And for women in particular, talking about the issue of either men or women in business, what has struck me is that the research is clear that the #1 unwritten rule of success in business, people report, men but very much women, is a strong network. And I've seen that. My career has had some nice ups and some painful downs. And having a strong network, in fact, I happened to go through this last night because I was curious. I said, I'd known Janet for a period of time. I'd had some involvement, but I didn't know Janet, who was the owner of 85 Broads. It's very interesting. I got to Janet, it was 9 steps through my network. I sat next to, as it turned out, Arthur Levitt on an airplane. I said, "You're Arthur Levitt." And he said, "Yes, I am." And I introduced myself, and he introduced me to someone who introduced me to someone who, 9 steps that ended up meeting Janet Hansen, ended up purchasing, investing in 85 Broads. So I'm a big believer in the power of the network, both to move one through one's professional life, but also as a new modern means of coming together to accomplish things.
Is it important to you that the network is primarily women? I mean, did you find in your career that you turned to women for help and they were helpful?
Well, that was sort of the challenge, is that Karen, I worked in London in investment banking in my 20s, and at one point I looked up and said, where are the women? And it's very hard if you look and there are none of them and you're being asked to leave a meeting to get coffee for the guys because you're the assistant, which was terrific, and I was happy to help out, but that, I wasn't the secretary, the executive admin at that point in time. So it's hard to, as they say, it's hard to be what you can't see. So and as you become more senior and there are fewer women, regardless of what industry you're in, that ability to have an outside network, I think, is really important. I think that's why people say, there are that many women? It's that big? It's that many women in the network? And that's part of it, women coming together to learn from each other.
How important was finding a mentor, the right mentor to you, Karen?
It actually was really important, and for me, and I think for most women who go into a male-dominated field, I say the best man for the job may be a man, and that was really important to me, to find someone who was interested in helping me develop my career, and I hope to do that as well. I think that it is a two-way street, though. Having a mentor is absolutely a two-way street. So, and you don't just go up to someone and say, "Will you be my mentor?" It's not, it's not really
that.
And how'd that work out? No. Okay.
Did not work.
So it's a two-way street, and you got to find the right fit. But I don't think it's an absolute necessity. I don't. So if you,
I don't know. I mean,
you think it is?
Well, I think for what you do, I mean, you have your own business, and so you've had ones at important stages for you. I think in bigger companies, we're all the product or the victim of our own circumstances, right? And so we overweight our own experience. But I can tell you, I've had mentors in my career. The fellow who was my mentor at Bernstein when I started as a research analyst took a year, after I took that pay cut in half, took years off my career trajectory. I mean years. Years. And he'd read the research, and this is, come on, so you're about to make a rookie mistake. Don't make that rookie mistake. Are you sure you want to upgrade that stock? I remember and over time I was able to do the same thing for him. And we would talk each other up to clients. You should really, look at this guy's work, etc. So I was very fortunate. I had mentors at Citi, and then I went to Bank of America, and the fellow who brought me in, the CEO, had told me when he came in that he would be there for 2 years and help my transition. He left less than 2 months later, and I was left without a network there, without a mentor there. And it was, boy, you could feel the difference. It was, it was just you didn't have anybody to turn to say, coach me. How did I do? Is this playing the wrong way?
Right.
And I really, really felt it.
And in your network, were there many women in that network, or was it predominantly male?
Well, by definition in this industry, within companies, it's going to be male. And again, I apologize because this is the research analyst in me. It's not right, it's not fair, but men have said that they are less comfortable giving women feedback. And you know why? They say they're scared they're going to get upset.
So you can find a mentor, it's probably going to be male in this industry, and those mentors are going to be afraid of giving you feedback.
No, but that's why you have to have the mentor, right? Because what you see happen, you'll see someone leave a meeting, and it'll be two guys, and the guy will turn to the other guy and say, "You really screwed the pooch on that one." Sorry, did that hurt?
Yeah.
This ring is like, I'm sorry. But buddy, you're going to have a bruise tomorrow. Buddy,
like your ring.
you did a bad, that was awful. And you should do this and this and this. But, they'll say they're not comfortable giving that feedback to a female. And there can be sort of a locker room, come on, you can do better. Let's go. Instead, it can be so fraught. If it's different genders, that's what the research showed gentlemen will report.
And then
so you have to have a mentor so that trust builds up.
Sure.
Where you can say it's not just a casual, did I mess it up, but let's talk about the feedback and I can take it.
Right, because that negative feedback is so much more valuable.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you rather hear, "Oh, this was wrong," instead of "That was great"?
I love hearing how terrible I was. I love it, because then you know that someone's telling you the truth.
Right.
Otherwise, why would they say that? But then you can make some changes.
And you have to ask for it, right?
Yes.
And I always said you have to surprise people into it. In fact, when I got booted out of Bank of America, I think I didn't do this on my first day, but it's sort of a blur. I think it wasn't more than 48 hours later. I called the members of the board, and I had 2 messages for them, both of which were heartfelt. And the first one, I wanted to thank them for having the opportunity to be part of the company. Because who gets to do that? Like, how cool is that, right? And the second thing was, what could I have done better?
Did they respond to that?
And they did, because I surprised them into it. Because who knows what they thought? I don't think they'd been called like that before, particularly after someone was invited to leave, and then asked for the feedback. And so I did. I got feedback.
Speaking of getting booted out of Bank of America, I'm just curious if you felt at any point in your career that you were set back or held back in any way because you are a woman.
It's a hard one to answer, because I can think of times when being a female, as we talked about before, was an advantage, and I can think of times it just didn't matter. My first big promotion, I was I think I was this pregnant. It felt like that pregnant. And I actually remember sort of almost pointing to my stomach to say, you do realize I'm about to go on maternity leave and you're giving me this promotion. I can tell you that what I have observed is that I've seen people who are different. When there's stress in an organization, that the people who are different end up sort of being pushed to the side. And I completely understand this, as the industry has gone through this terrible downturn. This idea of, I embrace your diversity, right? And let's talk at length so that we can understand each other. That's really great in an up market when you sort of feel like you have the time. But in a down market, we're under siege, things are terrible. Right. I need to be able to talk to you in shorthand, and it's very hard, and it's easy to look at the data and the information and say, in theory, we need more diverse people, because we all need to have a different perspective and look at this in different ways. That sounds good, but when the shareholders are revolting and the regulators are on top of you and the board is upset and your wife is yelling at you, and the dog is nipping at your heel. I mean, all that stuff is going badly. Those people who have different voices, it's a bit of that.
Do you feel like you've ever suffered any sort of setback because you're a woman, or in part because you're a woman?
I do. I think that there is much less of much less comfort, men and women show, with having women manage their money. I think that's, you know, I look at someone, you know, my mother was much more comfortable with male doctors, for example. And even though she was a very much of, you know, a champion of her daughters being independent women. So I think that there's still definitely a bias, and I know we've talked about this, and you talked about the number of registered investment advisors stuck at, what was it, 18, 19% women. And I think that women and men are less comfortable.
Is that generational?
I hope so. I really do, but I'm not sure.
Well, but you know, and I think the industry genuinely wants more women as financial advisors. Genuinely does.
The industry meaning the firms?
Yes, the
as
firms.
Opposed to the people actually investing the money?
I think that's right. Okay. And I think it's because they, in part, you know, they see the numbers and they see that women are 60% of college students and 60% of graduate students and are controlling the majority of the wealth and becoming more confident. And so, whereas women, you know, can report that they don't necessarily, you know, they don't necessarily have to have a woman financial advisor, or they might not, you know, feel like they need to, they aren't connecting as much with their male financial advisor. And in fact, when, you know, typically, it just facts are facts, in a couple, the man typically dies first. And when that happens, more than half the time, the woman leaves that advisor. So there's something that's not quite right there. She's not feeling that relationship. And, you know, the firms are trying to bring in more women, but they're really struggling to do it.
How do you get over that as a hedge fund manager, raising money? I mean, to convince women, I would think that selling to women would be easier coming from a woman.
Selling women to some women is easier, but I find women, much fewer women are pulling the purse strings. They're making the decisions. And it's not they're not capable, it's sometimes a responsibility that they don't want to bear. They're afraid of making a mistake. I think that's part of it, but I think that a lot of times the dynamic, if it's a part of a couple, is the man makes the decision. And in my book, I have this example where if you're a woman, you go into, you're in an oncologist's office and you hear the terrible words, you have breast cancer, and you're in there with your husband. You're not going to say, you know what, you two decide, I can't learn anything about this, I don't want to know anything, you guys decide, and whatever you think is best, that's the course that I'll do. So that seems crazy that you would have that conversation. Yet, so many women and men, couples, go see their financial advisor. This affects every area of their lives. And the women will sometimes say, you guys decide whatever you think is best. I'm not going to really learn anything, so you guys decide and I'll trust you.
But here's what also happens. So I've done quite a bit of that. Put the financial advisor with the client couple behind, you know, on the other side of the glass, and you watch them. And you come back and you watch the meeting. And you say to the gentleman financial advisor when it's done, you know, how did the meeting go? And the meeting went great. I was great. It was great, right? Did you engage, you know, 80% with the man, 20% with the woman, 60%? Completely equal is what they'll tell you. And then you tell them to watch the tape, and what you see is they talk to the man, talk to the man, talk to the man, nod to the lady. Talk to the man, talk to the man, talk to the man, nod to the lady. And when they leave, now your woman in your example who said you guys take care of it is fine because she's off sort of thinking about other stuff. But for the women who want to get engaged, when they leave, they're very turned off by this. And a lot of times the financial advisors don't realize they're doing it. And you have to show it to them. And it's not enough to say, I watched you and you did, and they're like, yeah, whatever, lady, that's what you think. But you have to show it to them. And when they see it, they say, I'm a jerk. Right, I'm really such a jerk.
Do they do that because they know it's ultimately the man pulling the purse string, so they're just selling to the person who's going to be the decider?
Well, the research has shown that men do tend to make decisions more quickly, and they are more comfortable with making decisions with imperfect information. So men will make that decision and do the trade, but here's the other side. Remember, I said women live longer, live healthier, and a woman is less likely to leave her financial advisor. And so there's more of an upfront investment that has to be made, but the relationship lasts quite a bit longer. But it's a little bit like saving for retirement, right? Which is, you know what, I am definitely going to get there. I'm definitely going to worry about being nice to the woman later.
Right.
But it's, you know, it's a later that never comes. And don't even get me started when they both die and the money goes to the kid. You know what percent of the time the financial advisor keeps the money then? 2.
Really?
2%. And as I've always said, you know, the pitch that doesn't work is, I'm sorry for your loss, my name is Joe, right? That's a tough way to pitch business, right? And so, but it's, again, we get busy, it's the near term, and you're not thinking about that longer term relationship.
Right, right. We're just about out of time in terms of our formal discussion up here, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. But before I turn it over to you guys out there, I know this is going to be a big, broad, sweeping question, but Karen, if there is one lesson from your book that you want people to walk away with, young women to walk away with, what would that be?
It would be to be their own advocate, and to do that they have to take some risks and stretch and maybe do what they think they're not ready for, because women underestimate their abilities and men perhaps the opposite. Is that diplomatic enough?
I.e. overestimate.
Right.
And Sallie, for you?
I'd say have fun. I really would. I have had fun the entire way. Even when I wasn't having fun, I was having fun. It really, I think if you know, there's a sense of, I need to wait till I get that promotion. I need to wait to have that baby. I had my babies early. A little bit by accident, actually. But once once they were there, we had them. And, you know, you wait for the next board meeting, you wait for the next, and it, you know, it goes by fast. And the journey is the fun. And so I hate it when I see some of these young ladies that just have their teeth gritted through it. And I know, and I mentioned earlier, you get tired. But even that, having the young children, I mean, having all of this is fun. And so have fun.
I like that. All right. We want to open it up to questions. So if anybody has questions, all the way back there in the corner. So basically, how do you find a mentor and how do you foster that relationship, Sallie?
I'd say like most relationships, which is, you know, if you're dating, if you haven't even gone on a date with someone and you ask them to marry you, it's not going to work. And so I think there's really for lack of a better term, a dating process by which you ask people for that feedback. And so you're in a meeting with somebody and you ask them, is there something I could have done better? How could I do? And don't just ask once and leave it, but continue to ask. And then also give, which is, you know, you're working on something, you know, I have some information that can help you. I have a connection that can help you. And so I have a very informal rule of thumb with my network is to try to expand it by a person every month. Have a new, interesting relationship every month, and to help someone in my network every week without any view that I'm going to get anything back from it. And you do that, and you just sprinkle around these favors, and you'd be surprised about how willing people are then to help you. So I think you got to give to get, and you need to foster these relationships, and don't expect them to turn into something overnight.
Karen?
I can't disagree with anything that you say, but I want to just highlight again the two-way streetness of it. It really is, you do need to give, and because you would want that of someone you're going to be a mentor to, and sometimes even the mentee outgrows the mentor, maybe surpasses the mentor, right? And sometimes it could be the situation becomes reversed, and that person could end up being of help to you. So it's very much a two-way street, and it changes, and it could change over the course of your career, different people for different roles.
One thing I would add that I think is important for those in the room who are somewhat more mature, the idea of reverse mentorship. So I have, in the past year and a half, since I have no longer been at Bank of America, have really gone out to meet with younger people And, you know, I just refuse to be one of these people. That Facebook is going to ruin this generation, I'm telling you. Rock and roll is going to do it. I just refuse, and I refuse to be one of my friends who doesn't, I don't get it, I don't have the time. I want to know about all of it, every bit of it. And so for young people, don't think, boy, that person's bringing something to me. I mean, you have such value to bring to people who are more mature. So it is to kids. So that's what I want to build on your point about a two-way street. Even when there's a big age difference, there's an enormous value to be brought.
Other questions right here in the front?
Hi. So I worked at Citi while you were there, and I worked with Stacy at the same time. So as I looked around, I would say at the senior level, you know, the number of women obviously dwindled, especially I would say a little on the mature side. But even on my trading desk right now, I would say I am the only female. So my question would be, what was it about the two of you that led you to have a successful career until now that got you to be sort of a, you know, that one of few? Do you think that was something that you did? Do you think that was something that was about your work ethic? I'd just love to hear what was different about the two of you that led you to have that sort of long career, because I would love to work as long as I can. And I think a lot of times, especially in this market, that's probably the most difficult, you know, the longevity is what I think.
I guess, you know, not giving up. You know, you set out on your career and you think it's all going to be a trajectory like that, and a lot of times it isn't. And just not giving up. I mean, you may end up going down, but just to keep moving forward. I think part of the reason that you see fewer and fewer women is some of them choose to get out. It's not always some, you know, male hierarchy forcing them out. Sometimes it's the women who just choose to get out. And so I don't choose to get out.
I agree with that. First of all, you can't take anything away from hard work. I've worked tremendously hard my entire career. I have memories of when my children were very young, writing research reports at our kitchen table on a Saturday night at 10, 11, you know, midnight at night. So the idea that somehow there's this magical have it all, I worked my tail off, and don't give up. I've had some ups and downs. And I've had people, when we had the issue at Citi and I was cordially invited to leave there, I remember that I had what as I call a frenemy told me, you are done, it is over, right? And so I've had some real ups and downs, and I think if you look up Weeble in the dictionary, there's my picture next to it, right? So you remember what a Weeble is? You hit the Weeble and it pops back up, and you hit the Weeble, and there's a Weebleness to it.
A Weebleness. It sounds like you have a wisp, but it's
wisp.
not, right.
Oh, you're in trouble now.
Okay.
Now you say it. But there is and again, that's when it comes to that point of joy, right? It's not a grim, but rather, you know, how fortunate are we that we get to participate in this business, in this industry? Let's go back in.
Right here.
What advice would you give a woman who's about to begin her MBA and looking to be in the recruiting process for such a male-dominated industries like leveraged finance, private equity? I'm currently in financial consulting, but I'm looking to make a shift even to more male-dominated, and would love to hear any ideas or recommendations that you have to stand out amongst, you know, a large pool of mostly males. You already do. The good news is you already do. And so whereas when the gentlemen come in to do the full day of interview and, you know, they're meeting with the seventh guy in the dark suit, you're going to be the one they don't forget. And you just need to capitalize on it. And to, you know, of course, make sure you're ready for the interview, your answers are crisp, you know, you've you know, done the research on the people and the company. It surprises me to this day how people don't do research. I interviewed a young person a few weeks ago to come, you know, work at 85 Broads. And this person had no idea who I was, which I don't have a problem with that. I really don't. Whoever's starting to tweet, don't tweet that. But except that, you know, just Google me in the taxi on the way to the meeting, right? Google, it's easy. It's easy.
And it just thought, you are so not getting this job because I can't, I mean, if you can't do that, like,
Right.
no. So you have to be all ready for it, but I think you've got an advantage because they will remember you.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't say that enough. If you, they're not even inquisitive enough to know, oh,
To wonder, who is this person
who
who I'm
is
interviewing
Sally?
with? Yeah.
Right. I mean, and then to not know who you are. I don't know if you can try to fake it at that point if you've blown it. But all right.
Blow it.
All right.
So Sally, I actually know who you are,
Well done.
which is why I'm here. I used to do PR for Schwab Advisor Services, so I followed your career heavily. There was a lot of press clearly when you left the Aversion, and there was a lot of press recently when you were taking over 85 Broads. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about where your head was at in between those two stages in your career. You'd already been really well known in the financial services industry. Your name resonates throughout, and I just wanted to know, I know you had a lot of offers on the table as well.
Yeah.
Where was your head at this point in your career?
I'm so pleased you asked me that question because I'm dying to answer it because I have had, it's funny because I've gotten tossed out twice. And the first time I got tossed out, I'm not supposed to say this. A friend of mine said, you need to stop saying this. I went home, I put on my sweatpants, and I waited for the phone to ring. And 10 months later, I had lunch with people and stuff. But 10 months later, it rang, and it was Ken Lewis, essentially offering me sort of the same, he offered me the job to run Merrill, which was a lot like the job to run Smith Barney, and I said, put me in, coach. And it's almost, it's almost as though somebody hit replay and said, let's try that again. We're going to give you another career break, which most people are not fortunate enough to have, right? But you've got all this time, go. And I said, all right, so this time what am I going to do? I am going to try to give back, and I'm going to try to learn. And I'm going to be very thoughtful about this. So I spent time in Washington, D.C., and it's very interesting because I'll go down to the Hill and offer to meet with people. And they're like, no, seriously, what do you want? I said, no, I just believe that bank regulation and what's happening in our industry is so complicated, and that having been a CFO, having run these businesses, having been a research analyst, I'm here to help, and I'm here to share whatever I can with you. So I'd spent time with the regulators. I hadn't spent time sort of in the executive and legislative areas. And the second thing was I said, I'm going to learn as much as I can about what's going on Silicon Valley and Silicon Alley. I'm going to take my learning curve, which was sort of this, and steepen it as much as I possibly can. And I joined the board of a startup, Motif Investing, out in California. I'm advising some startups. It has been the most interesting period of my life, honestly, because it's like being in school, but without grades or anybody criticizing me. And I know how fortunate I've been to be able to do it. And so what's really was interesting is, I've had some different opportunities to get back into the fray. And having been on this journey, I thought, nope, I'm going. I want to call myself an entrepreneur. I may be a small business owner, but sort of an entrepreneurial path has been such an eye-opener for me.
This one's for you, Ms. Finerman. In your book, you said 2 jobs you wouldn't let your daughter do. So say you're a 23-year-old woman working in the industrial field right now, and you're trying to break into the investment, or I want to be an investor. What roles do you think I should be pursuing that isn't necessarily investment banking that can break me through into the Wall Street industry?
Well, the thing about investment banking was I said you could maybe do it for a very short period of time, 2 or 3 years until you do something. You must have an exit plan to be an investment banker. Now, Sally was an investment banker, so she could tell you about, you learn quite a bit, but you must have an exit plan because when you're a 22-year-old woman, you can't imagine sort of what your life is going to be down the road. But if you want to have a family, there's a couple career paths, and that's one of them where you really don't have control over your schedule. And I know so few investment banking senior women, so few, that you're just setting yourself up. The odds are against you. So I wouldn't advise my daughters to do that.
So what field would you advise? Like, I don't want to be an investment banker. I would more likely be, would love to run my own fund. So what roles to just break into the field so that I can grow?
If you'd want to run your own fund, then see if you can be an analyst at a mutual fund, or see if you can be an analyst at a hedge fund. And I think it's
or
really
a sell-side analyst.
or sell side, right? As Sallie was, #1 rated sell side analyst. And also, I think it's important to invest your own money. To really, nothing teaches you like losing your own money. And don't cry. Do not cry if you do.
But you know, I would add something that only struck me years later. So as a sell-side research analyst, so I was an investment banker coming out of college. Those were the jobs that were on offer. I learned a tremendous amount, and then became a research analyst later. And the difference between the two was number of clients. So bear with me. But when you're an investment banker, you are typically working on 1 or 2 deals at a time, and maybe you've got 5 or 6 clients. So what happens when that one client whose deal you're working on says jump, you say how high? And because they're deals, and there's the adrenaline and the immediacy, and deals can be make or break for companies, they say get on an airplane, you're on an airplane. As a research analyst, I had 300 clients. And so even when the most important one would call, if Karen Finerman would call and say, I want to talk to you, Sallie, you'd say, yep, 2 weeks, you know, at 2 o'clock, I can fit you in. And she wouldn't be upset about it because she recognized there were a lot of clients. And that more clients versus fewer, perhaps counterintuitively, made all the difference. All the difference.
Back there with the glasses, yeah.
I'm very tempted seeing 3 tall women on the stage to ask you where you buy your clothes and shoes. But let me instead ask you a more serious question. Sallie said very early on in the discussion that having all sorts of diversity at senior management levels led to lower risk. We heard from Karen later in the discussion how having women as investment managers lowered risk. I'm interested in hearing a little bit more from Sallie about why having all that diversity at senior management takes down risk.
I think different perspectives. Again, a memory clear as a bell, sitting around, as it turned out, Sandy Weil's leadership table. And it was very interesting because Sandy, for those of you who are familiar with him or read the books about him, I mean, is sort of this caricature of the big cigar smoking, male chauvinist pig of his day. And I think he was, actually. But later, he had a very diverse management team. Diversity of color, diversity of gender, diversity of nationality. I would look around his table and thought, this is maybe the most diverse team on Wall Street. And what was interesting that I later figured out, it's because he was about results. He didn't see, he almost didn't see color. He was about, how are you running the business? What are the results? And I remember being at that table and having a colleague who ran the consumer business looked to the guy who ran trading and said, why does a CDO make sense? Could you stop and explain that? To my mind, the cause of the downturn, I know that it has been, the trial has happened in the court of opinion and the cause was greed. I know that has happened and the jury is in. I'm not sure that was the full reason. I think, from what I observed, the reason was groupthink. And it was a bunch of people looking at the same stuff, talking to the same people, the same time, and I'm talking people in companies, the regulators, the rating agencies, the boards. There was a whole micro or macrocosm where everybody, had these similar backgrounds and just kept having the same conversations again and again. And I've said, it's funny because I was smarter, but when I was an analyst before I got in the company, and then I remember thinking, oh, right, yeah, you guys are so smart. You've got it. I got it, right? And then when I've left, I've been able to think a bit more clearly. But when you've got a bunch of people who are in agreement about something, it can be really overwhelming. And as a nation, we certainly haven't had that conversation. One interesting piece of research for you that sort of came and went. So we were talking about this earlier. Subprime bankers had worse personal real estate performance than the average American. So these evil geniuses who were putting together the CDO squared of subprime were buying into the up and into the down, right? So if we're all betting, what's the punchline? Not the punchline you asked, but the punchline I've gotten myself to. If we're betting in financial services that it's just evil geniuses, and therefore we're going to be okay, we're placing the wrong bet.
She's decisive.
Yes. Holly in the back, the one man with a question.
Actually, I'm a high school guidance counselor, and I was wondering if you're trying to be a very proactive career counselor for students. So I was wondering how I can bring like this career and life advice to the high school I work in and the organization I work in, especially for my female students, maybe for the organization like 85 folks. I was wondering if you could point me in the direction of how to reach out to kind of bring maybe speakers into my students.
So in case you guys couldn't hear, he's a high school guidance counselor and wants to know how to incorporate some of these lessons that we've presented on stage tonight to his students, particularly females. 85 Broads, can they play a role?
We're not there yet. We reach into colleges. It's very interesting. When I have spoken to high school students, it has not been my experience that they're necessarily ready to hear this yet. That, you know, there's almost, you got to have a couple of scars before the advice starts to make sense. I think what can make a lot of sense for these young ladies is something like Lean In, which I think does a really terrific job of combining personal anecdotes with real research. I think if they read it in high school, they're going to have to read it again later, because it's only after you've had some of the experiences where I think you nod your head and said, yep, that sort of feels right to me.
Well,
I
Karen,
just wanna-
your book is the secrets that you tell
Right,
your
me.
daughters.
So it's
about
different
business and
ages,
yeah.
right. Also, I think the Council for Economic Education has curriculum for different ages that I think, it's not particularly female or male focused, but I think it's necessary for everyone in high school and even elementary school.
Right. But your
Yep.
daughters are high school age,
I
essentially.
have one high
So,
schooler,
yeah.
right, one sixth grader.
One on the way.
And I have a
you-
daughter on the way.
No.
Oh.
On the way to
Okay.
high school.
For God's sake.
You didn't know?
I didn't know.
Breaking news.
I had a moment there too.
Congratulations. Oh, thank you. Yes. I have 2 sets of twins already, so I really. Okay, I'm sorry. Were
what
you
would you
speaking?
say?
I've lost my way completely
Sorry
now.
about that. Would you say to your daughter, like, is it time for them to read your book?
You know, the way, I hope it is, and the way that I've tried to do that is I said, I forbid you from reading the book. It's inappropriate for you. There's embarrassing parts. I'm going to leave it right here, but don't read it when I leave the room. We'll see. My older daughter has read a little bit of it, but I want them to read it. I try to talk to them about being financially independent, and that's important. I know Kate, my younger daughter, at one point was thinking of being a gymnast. And, you know, we talked about the likelihood of a Jewish gymnast emerging again. She's adorable and has many talents, but I think we're going to go a different route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at your school, do y'all teach personal finance?
Yeah.
You do.
After school organizations, we do a lot of that. There are a lot of fun with capital. I can say that high school students aren't ready for that, so I do a college prep program.
Yeah.
Juniors and seniors. What I find when I bring in career speakers, it really psychs them up. It gets them excited to study that in college. So my purpose is to get them to kind of go into school with some kind of focus. I know it's a balance to not pressure them to say you have to declare this major.
Right.
This major.
They're young.
Freak out. But I also don't want them just to go there and just party for 4 years, 22, like now or whatever.
Right.
So I've been doing this for 6 years, so now I've seen the kids who've gone to college just to go through the motions, and they graduate and they're back at their high school job. Or I've seen the kids who've kind of taken the small steps to do internships, to maybe double minor or double major, and just try to figure things out. I've seen these things work, because I've followed my students throughout these years. So when I bring in career speakers,
But-
like, I'm sorry, just like
Yeah.
an example would be we
this is where I think media can help more, which is in the representation of business as a career. You know, the business person is typically viewed as, you know, hardly the hero of the story. And you don't have any, I mean, now you can start yelling out, but I'm trying to think about positive representations of female business people in fictional TV, right? I don't know that we've got that. And I do remember being younger and watching LA Law and watching Susan Day and thinking, oh, I want to be Susan Day. I mean, and I wanted to be Mary Tyler Moore before that, and I wanted to be you know, that girl before that. And you know, maybe we've got some, and I don't watch, you know, besides Game of Thrones and Mad Men, it's hard to get other stuff in.
Mad Men definitely not.
Definitely
too many
not.
examples.
But I want to hear, Melissa, your experience. You are in an interesting spot of media and voyeur of Wall Street.
Right.
About your career path and whether you found it was difficult being a woman, or?
Well, I think that in my business, because it's such a visual business, I think that the assumption is that you're on TV because you look a certain way. And that you really don't know anything, that you're reading the teleprompter and you're there because, you know, you wear size 4. I mean, that's basically it. And so that is what the viewer wants to see immediately. If they don't like something out of your mouth, they just assume that you're stupid, you don't know what you're talking about, and you didn't go to a good school and you slept with somebody. I mean, that's a sad truth of the business. I mean, I think that as time goes on, people will judge you for what you are. But it is getting those people to continue to watch you to make that judgment before they leave. I think that it's sort of a double standard for women, because it's an advantage to be a woman covering financial news because, let's face it, predominantly the viewers are male. So it is an advantage. At the same time, it's a disadvantage because you're not taken as seriously. Or if you're very aggressive, like we on our show, Fast Money, surrounded by traders. You have to be aggressive because that is the nature of traders. And if you're not standing up and being as aggressive as your traders, you're not doing your job. But that can easily be perceived as being a bitch. So it's that sort of same emotional bandwidth, I think, that you were talking about earlier. I completely relate to that because you don't want to be too emotional, show too much sympathy, be too in the moment. But at the same time, you don't want to be too sort of distant and objective because then you're viewed as cold. So you have to walk the line.
And some of these TV shows actually have women in slightly more revealing clothing as well, which I'm sure they're doing. I'm sure they have their viewership reasons for doing it, but is hardly helpful.
Exactly. I mean, women on CNBC, we wore nice, tight, not tight, but well-fitting dresses. Men will still wear suits and ties. So that's the reality of the business still, for better or for worse. One last question, because then we're going to wrap it up here. Let's go all the way in the back. Yep.
I have a question regarding value of higher education. I've been working 2 years, but I like, for example, which is already the report saying this year's graduate has the toughest time to find a job. And I was wondering, what's your comments on higher education when people finish their degree and find out it's not what they really want to do, or when they go through the interview and find out they really don't have that essence. In another sense, what would be the ideal young women candidates? And standing in front of you, you will say, I'm going to hire you.
Stay in school. Stay in school. If you look at the difference in the unemployment rate of those with a college education versus those without, it's stay in school. And I don't care if you can't figure it out right away. I did not figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up until I was 1 month shy of the age of 30. And at that point, I just felt like my life is over. I'm staring at the big 3-0, and I don't have it. And it really took me a long time to get to it. But I always think about it as you build that base with education, and then one of the things that investment banking was good for was you continued to learn. And so while I couldn't figure it out, I thought I just need to be learning as much as I possibly can. And then almost, obviously it wasn't literal, but figuratively, one day I was standing in the kitchen, I had an infant son at home, I was eating a pear, and I thought, I should be a research analyst. By Jove, I've got it. And I did, and I really did. but you know, I had to sort of have that broad base before I could get there. So it's okay if you can't figure it out and you might be a late bloomer. But, you know, and in school too, in business school, I'm a big fan of business school. If, you know, it's not for everybody, not everybody wants to do it, but business school for me allowed me to try on a bunch of different hats, right? Did I want to go in marketing? Not really, but I tried it, and that was better than having a whole job. So I think the ability to keep your optionality and keep your base very broad is a good one.
I would agree. Yep, stay in school.
Stay in school.
Yeah, there was a public service announcement when I was growing up.
Don't do drugs.
Don't do drugs. And then it was Fernando Valenzuela, who was the pitcher for the Dodgers, I think. And he's like, here's my pitch, stay in school. And I remember that very well.
But who, Karen, to her question, who would you want to hire if you're interviewing a bunch of MBA students? What sort of qualities would you want to see?
I would much rather see someone who had some really hard job, not some great resume builder, traveling the world, exploring. I want to see someone who was really working hard at maybe a job that isn't, you know, so great, but hard work is really important. That would probably be the #1 thing. It's not where you went to school.
Yeah.
And
That's
Google
not
who
it.
you're
Oh, for
interviewing
Google
with.
Yes,
your
for
interview. The
God's
other thing
sake.
I would say,
Always goes back to
tell
that.
them you want the job.
Yeah.
You know,
yes.
tell them you want it. This idea of, you know, I'm going to play hard to get. It worked with my husband. It doesn't work with a job. And to be remembered, to have done your research and say, I want this job. In fact, our summer intern is sitting in the front row, and she said, I want this job. I said, you can have it. And she's, you know, 2 days in is doing a phenomenal job. But you know, you want to be remembered, and that positive energy is a big selling point.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for being a terrific audience. Thank you, Karen and Sallie, for some great advice tonight.